Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. In Pakistan, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced a financial package of $7.5 billion to curb the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on economy. In a press briefing, Khan ruled out a complete curfew in the country despite partial lockdowns in all the provinces. There are 892 coronavirus cases in Pakistan with 7 fatalities. The number of coronavirus infections across Pakistan has risen to 892 with 99 cases in 24 hours. Provincial governments of Sindh, Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan have ordered shutdown amid virus spread. Giving a media briefing, Special Assistant to Prime Minister on Health Services, Dr. Zafar Mirza said out of all the infected cases, 5 are critical, while 6 have recovered. He said there are over 7,700 suspected cases in the country. Mirza said nearly 4,900 people have been quarantined. He added that so far 7 people with infection have died across the country. The southern province of Sindh has 399 infection cases, while Punjab has 249. In Balochistan, 110 people are infected. Gilgit-Baltistan has reported 80 cases, while the capital city of Islamabad has 15 people with the infection. To contain the coronavirus pandemic, over 1.7 billion people across the world have been locked down as more countries impose curbs. The death toll from the virus has topped 16,500. Italy has reported 602 new deaths, bringing the total to 6,077 with nearly 64,000 infected. Meanwhile, in the UK, 54 people have died in the past 24 hours, taking the toll to over 300 with more than 6,600 confirmed cases. This report has the details.
While the world struggles to develop a vaccine for the fatal COVID-19, the virus continues killing thousands across the world every day. Zimbabwe lost its first life to the disease, while Myanmar reported its first case. New Zealand and the UK have now imposed a virtual nationwide lockdown that will be enforced by the police.
People will only be allowed to leave their home for the following very limited purposes: shopping for basic necessities as infrequently as possible, 1 form of exercise a day, for example, a run, walk or cycle, alone or with members of your household, any medical need to provide care or to help a vulnerable person, and travelling to and from work, but only where this is absolutely necessary and cannot be done from home.
Russia has sent 11 planes carrying military specialists and equipment to the crisis-hit Italy. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is shipping COVID-19 test kits to Uganda as cases in the East African country rise. The global health body has warned that the pandemic is accelerating, as it took just 4 days for cases to reach 300,000 from 200,000.
The pandemic is accelerating. It took 67 days from the first reported case to reach the first 100,000 cases. 11 days for the second 100,000 cases. And just 4 days for the third 100,000 cases.
But amid rising cases and deaths in the US, President Donald Trump says he wants to reopen the country for business in weeks, not months. Without quoting any evidence to that effect, Trump claims continued closures can result in more deaths than the pandemic itself.
Moreover, the World Health Organization says members of the G20 group of nations should demonstrate solidarity in tackling the new coronavirus pandemic. Meanwhile, finance ministers from the world's 20 largest economies have agreed to develop an action plan to respond to COVID-19. G20 leaders are due together for an extraordinary virtual summit in coming days as the world races to contain the virus. WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus called for political coordination at the global level to cope with the crisis.
This week, I will be addressing heads of state and government from the G20 countries. Among other issues, I will be asking them to work together to increase production, avoid export bans, and ensure equity of distribution on the basis of need.
The IMF and the World Bank have both forecast that the pandemic will trigger a global recession in 2020. Now, moving on to India, where the authorities have forcefully removed all the sit-ins against the controversial Citizenship Act in different cities amid lockdown in the country. 30 states and union territories across India announced shutdown after the country reported 9th death due to the COVID-19. After 101 days, the police in New Delhi removed Shaheen Bagh sit-in that has been the heart of the countrywide protests. The official said women protesters were removed despite their refusal to end the sit-in in Delhi. They said they have detained at least 9 people, including 6 women. The authorities also removed protest sites from Jafarabad, Jamia, and Turkmen Gate in the Indian capital. The Indian government has been facing countrywide protests against the law since December the 11th. Meanwhile, the ruling Indian BJP's Shivraj Singh Chauhan has been sworn in as the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh after toppling the elected Congress government. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's party formed government through horse trading after 22 Congress lawmakers switched their loyalties. The resignations pushed the Congress government into minority, leading to Chief Minister Kamal Nath's resignation on March the 20th. Chauhan took oath as Chief Minister for the 4th time, 15 months after his government was voted out of the power. Earlier, Chauhan was elected the leader of the BJP's legislature party at a meeting of MLAs held at the state BJP headquarters. Last year, in July, the central ruling party toppled the state of the government of Karnataka in a similar manner. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani says he met and offered Abdullah a major role in the peace process, but he stresses change in the constitution. The president issued a statement after US announced $1 billion cut in its aid to Afghanistan after failing to break the political deadlock. In a statement, Ghani says Abdullah wants a new political structure that is against the constitution. Ghani also said his talks with US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo were positive and constructive. Meanwhile, self-proclaimed President Abdullah said Pompeo's visit was a good opportunity to resolve political issues but was lost. Abdullah said continued US cooperation is vital in ensuring the national interests of Afghanistan and peace in the country. The US and the Taliban discussed the implementation of the Doha deal, including a speedy prisoner release and the start of the intra-Afghan talks. Taliban spokesperson Suhail Shaheen says US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met Taliban leader Mullah Baradar in Doha to discuss possible ways forward. Shaheen said both leaders discussed ceasefire, permanent peace, and the future political system for the Afghan people. The spokesperson said Pompeo assured that American troops are being withdrawn from Afghanistan as per schedule. Earlier, Pompeo met President Ashraf Ghani and former Chief Executive Abdullah during his day-long visit to Kabul. Yemen's Houthi rebels have warned the Saudi-led government coalition of carrying out preemptive strikes against any offensive operation. In a statement, Houthi spokesman Yahya Sarai says the group possesses deterrence weapons, including ballistic and winged missiles. Sarai threatened the coalition that they should expect thousands of ballistic missiles in the near future. He said Houthis killed and wounded over 10,000 government troops since the beginning of the aggression 5 years ago. Yemen has been beset by violence and chaos since 2014. Moving on, the Arab League has called on the international community to exert more pressure on Israel to release Palestinian prisoners. In a statement, the body's Assistant Secretary General, Saeed Abu Ali, said Israel must provide prisoners necessary protection amid the spread of the coronavirus. Abu Ali said the rules of international humanitarian law have become more urgent in the light of the pandemic. He said it is important to pressure the occupation forces to save the lives of over 5,000 prisoners. Abu Ali also held the occupation authorities responsible for the lives of the Palestinian prisoners. He stressed that the global community must assume its responsibility to ensure their release. Turkey says it has killed 6 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Syria. The Defense Ministry says the fighters were killed during Operation Peace Spring. The ministry said it will not stop the operation against the militants in the region. Ankara says the operation is aimed at establishing a safe zone on the border to resettle some of the Syrian refugees in the country. Ankara holds a fighter group responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year-long conflict. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has accused the US and its allies SDF of continuous theft of Syria's oil. Syrian state media says in a meeting, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Assad discussed the situation in the US-occupied northeastern Syria. Assad said the US has captured all the key oil fields in the northeastern region, calling it a heist. In a statement, Russia's defense ministry says the two sides discussed issues of ensuring a stable cessation of hostilities in the Idlib de-escalation zone. It said they also talked about various aspects of military technical cooperation in the joint fight against international terrorist groups. Meanwhile, Syrian air defense says it intercepted a drone in the vicinity of Himimim air base near the coastal city of Jabala. In Libya, 2 miners have been killed in an artillery attack by Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces in southern Tripoli. The UN-recognized government of the National Accord says the casualties were reported after a house was collapsed by the attack. GNA spokesman Mohammed Kununu says 6 people have been killed in violation of a ceasefire during the last 48 hours. Libya has been torn apart by a civil war between the GNA and the Libyan National Army since April last year. Despite multiple efforts and ceasefire agreements brokered by the UN, both the sides have been unable to agree on a truce. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. A series of 57 moderate and minor aftershocks have rattled Croatia's capital Zagreb. This follows the 2 earthquakes of magnitude 5.3 and 5 that hit Zagreb on Sunday. European Mediterranean Seismological Center says the aftershocks of the magnitude from 2 to 3.3 were registered 6 to 7 kilometers north of the city. The tremors knocked out electricity and internet transmission to contain the areas. 200 servicemen continue to clear the city's streets of the debris, and over 300 more are on high alert to join the effort. The U.S. Congress and the White House officials say they are close to agreeing on a $2 trillion coronavirus aid package. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says a deal is expected today as talks run late into the night. Mnuchin and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said they had spoken by phone with President Donald Trump during the long night of negotiations. While the two sides have resolved many issues in the sweeping package, some remain. Schumer also reiterated the Democratic Party's desire to conclude the deal today and vote on it this evening. Earlier, Trump slated the Democrats for including open border and Green New Deal measures in the aid package. U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper says the coronavirus pandemic can impact combating the readiness of the American military. Esper said despite the fast-spreading illness, the U.S. military remains capable of conducting national security missions. Esper said the decrease in the combat readiness may happen due to the cancellation of a number of exercises. He said the U.S. military will set up field hospitals in New York and Seattle, subject to Federal Emergency Management Agency's approval. The Defense Secretary admitted Pentagon was unable to help every state as FEMA holds the authority to prioritize requests. Esper said Pentagon tests its staff regularly and has already reduced the numbers by about 60%. Earlier on Monday, Pentagon revealed 133 soldiers had contracted the illness as 7 are hospitalized while 4 have recovered. US Federal Reserve has rolled out a massive array of programs to backstop an economy reeling under sweeping restrictions amid coronavirus crisis. The announcement marks a new chapter in Fed's money printing as it commits to expanding its balance sheet as necessary. More in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic has rattled the global economy as it heads towards recession. The U.S. Central Bank, for the first time, has announced to purchase corporate bonds and to backstop direct loans to companies worth trillions of dollars. It has pledged easy access to credit lines for small and medium businesses, promising to expand its asset purchases by as much as needed to stabilize markets. Economists believe the steps taken are in the right direction.
So I think that the Federal Reserve, when we look back at this, I think the Federal Reserve is acting very quickly. It's building on the playbook that it developed in the 08-09 crisis, but extending it. For example, it's including it's including muni bonds in its program.
President Donald Trump praised the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell for an extraordinary policy measure.
Today I called up Jerome Powell and I said, Jerome, you've done a really good job. I was proud of him. That took courage. And ultimately, you're going to see the fruits. Now, he's not finished. I mean, he's got other arrows in the quiver, or whatever they say. I will tell you, he's got plenty of arrows. But no, I'm very happy with the job he did.
The multi-trillion-dollar programs are backed by the Treasury Department to ensure that the Fed does not lose money.
The World Health Organization says the coronavirus outbreak will overwhelm war-stricken Yemen's health system. The body's representative in Yemen, Altaf Musani, says the WHO has placed teams on high alert to help the country's fragile health system. Musani said the body has increased the distribution of vital medical gear and test kits to combat the outbreak. He warned that only 50% of the country's health system is operational, which is insufficient to tackle the coronavirus patients. Yemen has not officially reported a single case of COVID-19, but the WHO says it is scaling up preparedness and response efforts in case of infections. Hand washing to combat the spread of the coronavirus is the order of the day, but it is an unaffordable luxury for millions in the war-ravaged Yemen, where clean water is dangerously scarce. This report has the details.
Yemen's broken healthcare system has yet to register any cases of the novel coronavirus. But if the pandemic does hit, the impact will be unimaginable in a country where 5 years of conflict has created the world's worst humanitarian crisis.
If the virus spreads in Yemen, it will be a disaster in the whole country because of the lack of medical supplies and qualified staff and health centers in villages.
According to the UN's Children Agency, nearly 18 million people, including 9.2 million children, do not have regular access to safe water. Only 1/3 of Yemen's population has access to piped water.
I wake up every day at 7:30 in the morning. I prepare the donkey and go to bring water. Then I take my breakfast and I go back again to bring water. I go back and forth several times to bring water until 10 in the morning.
Yemen suffered one of its worst ever outbreaks of cholera in 2017. Years of underinvestment in public water and sanitation systems provided the foundations for this outbreak.
The diseases that are transmitted by the polluted water are, for example, cholera, amoebiasis, and diarrhea. Moreover, the water is not suitable for drinking due to a high percentage of salt in it.
Doctors Without Borders says in current situation of Yemen's healthcare system, it would be a disaster if the new coronavirus reached the country.
In China, Wuhan city, the starting point of the coronavirus pandemic, is slowly returning to normalcy. People are going back to work and public transport is also resuming operations. Meanwhile, the death toll and the number of infected people continue to surge worldwide. This report has more.
The coronavirus pandemic, which has put the whole world on hold, originated right here in Wuhan. The city has spent 2 months under lockdown, but now authorities have begun easing restrictions. Chinese health officials report that there have been no new local COVID-19 cases for 5 days. The city's public transport infrastructure is also active once more. Those with health certificates have also been allowed to return to work.
My company resumed work several days earlier. Everyone has issued a health code after having their physical condition checked and body temperature taken. My company gave us the pass and I'm on my way home after a night shift.
Wuhan was first put under lockdown on 23rd January, which brought the lives of 60 million people to a standstill. The easing of restrictions follows Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to the city earlier this month.
We applied online for the permit to return to Wuhan and got approved last night. So I came to Wuhan from Xianing this morning.
The Chinese authorities confirmed there are another 39 infections brought from overseas. Authorities have decided to divert Beijing-bound flights to other cities. Passengers will be screened for the virus, and after clearance, they will be allowed to move to Beijing.
In the US so far, 16 states have imposed a lockdown to contain the new coronavirus pandemic. With summer just about to begin, the restrictions have hit the tourism industry hard, but this hasn't slowed down the spirit of some. This report has more.
Some 158 million Americans have been restricted to their home to contain the spread of COVID-19 outbreak. In such time, a 40-year-old tour guide has decided to offer a virtual tour of the Californian city live on Instagram. Adam Duford would usually drive hundreds of tourists in his buses across Santa Monica along the Pacific Ocean. He's doing the same this year, only without the physical presence of tourists.
If you were to come here and take a tour with us, I'm giving you what you would be getting without the actual physical presence of being here. So it's all the history, any famous sites that are around, celebrity information here and there.
This season, with no revenue to come in, his strategy is to just be creative and productive in an attempt to think and remain positive.
And I was telling you about. I really hope that this brings a lot of joy to people that are stuck at home. I mean, obviously, nothing will be equivalent to the real thing, but it's just something I can do. You know, everybody's trying to do something. This is my part to try and give someone, you know, for 30 minutes an escape from whatever real life is right now.
But not all vacationers are confined to homes. In Florida, even though all bars and nightclubs have to be closed by 5 p.m., locals are seen paddling, jogging and cycling along Miami's Venetian Way. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has urged caution while celebrating spring break as Miami Beach shuts down hotels to visitors.
Well, cryptocurrencies have gained over $14 billion in the last 24 hours. It comes as equity markets continue to come under pressure due to coronavirus fears weighing on investor sentiment. Industry side CoinDesk says major cryptocurrency Bitcoin surged about 10%. Ethereum was up over 7%, while XRP saw a more than 5% jump in its price. Earlier this month, cryptocurrencies took a beating following a near-complete market sell-off, wiping off $93.5 billion. Bitcoin, which has been termed as digital gold and a safe haven asset to park money, also witnessed a 48% plunge in its market capitalization. It is now being considered a risk asset, such as an equity, after the recent market shock. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.